Hello, welcome to the lecture for Module 2. This lecture is going to be recorded in about 6 segments of various lengths. So be ready to look at several segments for this lecture. The learning objectives of Module 2 is that by the end of this module, you should be able to create a frequency distribution using data from a qualitative and a quantitative variable. You should be able to select an appropriate graph to display the frequency distribution of either a qualitative or a quantitative variable. You should be able to explain in understandable terms what a frequency distribution represents. And also you should be able to explain in understandable terms a graphical display of a frequency distribution and be able to draw practical conclusions. So that's what we intend to learn in this module. All right, the assumption that we're going to make from this point on is that all the data sets that we will be provided with, or that we will be working with, has observations that come from assessing the correct characteristic of interest of individuals in a representative sample from the target population, whatever that target population might be. Also, all the values in the data set are correct. In other words, the characteristics of interest have been accurately assessed and correctly documented. So, in other words, the data sets that we'll be working on from now until the end of the course, we will trust them as being correct and being valid, and so our conclusions, or the conclusions we draw from our analysis, will be correct. So again, I'm not going to come back and question the data sets as we work through the different problems that we will be working through in the different modules. All right, so that's the big assumption. The data will be correct and is representative of the target population. The other concept to be mindful of is what we call the raw data. This is the data that is directly obtained from the people, either yourself or individuals that are helping you with the study. They're collecting the data, and as the data is recorded and provided to you, is that what we call the raw data. Very often this raw data must be cleaned because it has mistakes in them. Often we misspell words, or we perhaps place 2 decimal points, and here, like, we don't know which is the right quantity. Is it 2.3545 or 335.45? So we need to go back to the person that collected the data and clarify this kind of errors. And then when we do all this for every observation in the data set, then we will be happy that the data has been properly measured and recorded. Once we have that data properly recorded and cleaned up, we will proceed to construct a frequency distribution of that data, or for each of the variables in the data set. Now, I wanted to point out that there is a definition that we will be using very often, and that is of frequency. Frequency refers to the number of times the value of a variable is observed. And hopefully this will become clear as we go on to produce frequency distributions and graphs. All right, another thing to talk about is the language that I tend to use and you often hear is that, for example, we say, oh, I'm dealing with qualitative or categorical data, when we really mean that the data comes from a qualitative variable. Similarly, we talk about discrete or continuous data, indicating that the data comes from a quantitative discrete variable or a quantitative continuous variable, respectively. So again, you may hear me talking about the data itself being discrete or continuous or categorical. And what I really mean is I'm talking about a variable that is a qualitative or categorical, or a variable that is quantitative discrete or quantitative continuous. All right, so I put this diagram here that I show you in chapter 1. And the reason I'm doing that is because this chapter is divided into 2 parts. So the first part, we're going to learn to summarize qualitative data and to display the qualitative data using 3 graphs, the bar graph, the pie chart, and the Pareto chart. Then the second part of the course, we're going to learn to summarize data from a quantitative variable, either discrete or continuous. And then we're going to learn to construct a histogram to represent the frequency distribution of quantitative data. And in the very last part of the chapter, we'll talk briefly about 2 other displays that do not rely on the summarized data. And that's the stem and leaf diagram and the dot plot. All right, I'm going to stop. This is the end of the first section, or the first segment for the Module 2 lecture.